I never thought being alone in my own house could make me feel like prey, like I was being stalked by something both real and unreal at the same time. And to understand how terrifying it became, I need to start from the beginning. It was a Wednesday evening in late November, one of those early winter nights where the sky turns black by 5 and the wind hisses through every small gap in the window frames like it's trying to get in. And my parents were flying out to visit my aunt in Florida for her surgery, leaving me alone for 5 days in the house I grew up in, a modest 2-story home tucked away in the quieter part of town, not rural, but spaced out enough that neighbors didn't notice much unless something was literally on fire. And I was 20 at the time, a sophomore in college, studying remotely while working part-time at the gas station on Route 9. So they figured I was old enough to hold down the fort, and truthfully, I thought so too, until the second night, when things started happening that I still can't explain, and I've replayed every moment, every second, every choice I made, wondering if I invited it in somehow, if I looked too long into the dark, or whispered something in my sleep that I shouldn't have. But it all really started that Thursday evening, after my shift ended at 9 p.m., and I drove home, tired, cold, a little annoyed because someone at work had told me I looked pale, like I hadn't slept in days. Which was weird because I felt fine, just drained, maybe from the quiet house. Maybe from the way I hadn't seen another soul up close all day, and when I got home, the porch light was flickering again, even though my dad had just replaced a bulb, so I chalked it up to electrical problems and went inside, locked the door, kicked off my shoes, and turned on the TV for background noise. I was a documentary about underwater caves. Peaceful enough, but I couldn't shake the weird feeling that I was being watched. Not by anyone outside, but from inside. Like someone had been sitting on the couch while I was gone, and just left the room before I walked in, and I laughed it off at first, calling myself paranoid. Even sent a text to my group chat joking about ghosts, and how I was alone with my thoughts, and they were getting mean. But around midnight, as I was brushing my teeth upstairs, I heard 3 slow, deliberate knocks from downstairs, not on the door, but like in the wall. The kind of knock that didn't make sense spatially, like it came from inside the house, and I froze, toothbrush still in my mouth, foam dripping onto my shirt, heart pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything else for a second, and I stood there, listening, not moving, waiting to hear it again, but there was nothing, and I even walked downstairs, every step slow and heavy, like I was descending into something I didn't understand, and checked every room, turned on every light, even said hello, out loud, like an idiot, and of course, nothing was there. So I told myself it must have been the heater knocking. Old houses do that, right? But I couldn't shake the way it felt like it had rhythm, like a person knocking to get your attention. And that night, I barely slept. Every creak and groan of the house felt personal, targeted, like the building was talking to me. And I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of footsteps upstairs, which would be normal, except I was sleeping on the only floor that had bedrooms. And I knew I was the only one home, but still, I got up, adrenaline hot in my veins, and grabbed the mini bat I kept in my closet from Little League, opened the door slowly, heart in my throat, and crept through the hallway, which smelled weirdly like old coins and damp leaves, and I checked every room, closet, bathroom, even under the bed, nothing, and I told myself maybe I'd dreamt it. Maybe I'd gotten up and walked without knowing, but the carpet was too clean. No sign of recent footsteps or motion, and I finally went back to bed, refusing to look at the dark shape of the attic door and the ceiling above the hallway, because something about it felt wrong now, like it was aware of me noticing it, and I pulled the blanket over my head like a scared kid, which I hadn't done in over a decade, and tried to will myself into unconsciousness. But every time I drifted off, I had the same horrible half-dream, where I was staring at my bedroom door, wide awake, and someone was on the other side just breathing, not trying to come in, just standing there. breathing like they were waiting for me to open it. And the next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all, and I found the front door unlocked. Not wide open, not ajar, but unlocked. And I know I locked it. I always lock it, and even checked it twice the night before. And my stomach dropped, because it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like a message, like someone had been inside, or wanted me to think they had. And I started texting my parents, asking if anyone else had a key, or if they could check the cameras remotely. But the cameras, of course, were down, showing work error. And my parents didn't respond for hours, because they were in surgery prep with my aunt. So I was left to sit with that dread all day, and I didn't go to work. I just sat in the living room with every light on, the bat in my lap, jumping at every little sound, like a squirrel on a caffeine drip. And around 4 p.m., I finally decided to shower, thinking maybe I'd feel better after. And as I stood under the hot water, trying to relax, I heard the click of the bathroom doorknob turn. Not open, just turn, and I shut the water off immediately. Standing there dripping, shivering, every muscle tense. And I said, "Who's there?" and waited. But there was only silence. And I crept to the door, yanked it open, with a towel wrapped around me. And of course, no one was there. But I could smell something weird in the hallway again, like wet fabric and soil. And I saw something, I swear, just as I looked into the mirror, like a figure slipping out of view behind me, tall and pale, too thin to be normal. And I screamed, loud and guttural, and punched the mirror without thinking, sending shards flying, cutting my knuckles. But the reflection was just me, shaking, terrified, bleeding. And I spent the next hour cleaning blood and glass off the floor, bandaging my hand, and trying not to cry because I didn't want to feel crazy in that night. I didn't sleep in my room. I dragged my blankets downstairs and slept on the couch, with all the lights on and the bat within reach. And sometime around 2 a.m., the TV turned on by itself, too static, loud as hell. And the volume kept rising until I lunged for the remote and shut it off, my heart racing, my ears ringing. And that's when I noticed the basement door was wide open, even though I always kept it shut, and there were wet footprints leading from the stairs to the edge of the living room rug. And I swear I hadn't heard a thing, not one footstep, not one creak, and I just stood there, breathing hard, whispering, "This isn't real, this isn't real," over and over, until I couldn't hear myself anymore. Only the quiet, humming dread pressing against my skin like a fog. And that's when I decided I had to get out, to go sleep at a friend's or get a motel. But my phone was dead, and the charger cable was cut clean through, like someone took scissors to it. And the front door, when I finally ran to it, hands shaking, wouldn't open, not because it was locked, but because something was holding it shut from the other side, like someone was leaning against it gently, applying just enough pressure to keep me inside. And I backed away, gasping, feeling like I was suffocating in my own home. And that's when the hallway light upstairs clicked on by itself, one slow flicker at a time. And I heard the same 3 knocks again, 1, 2, 3, this time directly above me, right where my bedroom was. And the sound of someone dragging something heavy across the floor followed, slow and deliberate, like they knew I could hear, like they wanted me to hear. And I remember sinking to my knees, clutching the bat, whispering for someone, anyone, to help me. But I was still alone, trapped in the house I had always thought was safe. And whatever was in there with me, it wasn't trying to kill me, not yet. It was trying to own me, to make me part of the house, to break me piece by piece. And I knew if I didn't get out soon, I wouldn't just be haunted, I would become the haunting. I didn't sleep that night, how could I? Instead, I just sat there, curled up on the living room floor, with the bat gripped so tightly in my bandaged hand that my fingers went numb, listening to the soft, almost playful creaking of the floorboards above me as whatever was up there paced slowly back and forth, like it was waiting for me to make a move. And every time I even considered standing, I'd hear a quiet tapping against the wall, or the scrape of nails on wood, like it was warning me don't. And by the time the first hint of morning light broke through the curtains, it felt like I'd aged years. Like my sanity was splintering at the edges, so I forced myself to move, to do something. And I grabbed my phone and ran outside without even checking if the coast was clear. He just bolted like a man fleeing a burning building, barefoot, still in the shirt I slept in. And I sat in my car shaking as the cold morning air bit through me. And I charged my phone enough to call my friend Calvin, who lived 15 minutes away, and when he picked up, my voice cracked so bad I barely recognized myself, and I told him I needed to get out, just for a few hours, just until my parents got back. And he didn't ask a lot of questions. Maybe he heard the fear in my voice, but he said to come over. And I drove there with every mirror in the car adjusted so I could watch the back seat. Heart pounding the whole way, because part of me was convinced I'd see something sitting behind me if I looked for too long. And when I got to Calvin's place, I didn't even make it past the living room before I broke down and told him everything about the knocks, the basement, the mirror, the footsteps, the door refusing to open. And as I talked, I watched the way his expression changed from skeptical to disturbed to deeply unsettled. Especially when I mentioned the attic, and he finally said, "Dude, that sounds like what happened to my cousin's house in Maine. They had this thing in the attic too. And weird stuff kept happening until they moved out." And even though I didn't want to hear it, I begged him to tell me more, and he said his cousin used to talk about how the attic had this smell, like iron and mold, and how her mom heard voices in the vents, and how their dog refused to go upstairs. And they finally had some priest come bless the place, and even then, it didn't stop. And I felt sick just hearing it, because it mirrored so much of what I'd gone through. And Calvin let me crash on his couch for a bit, and when I woke up that evening, he handed me a grilled cheese sandwich, and said, "We're going back together, you can't let that thing win." And I hated the idea of returning, but I knew he was right, because if I kept running, the house would never feel safe again. So we went back around 7 p.m., with flashlights, salt, and his big-ass crowbar, just in case. And when we stepped inside, the whole house felt off, not loud, not dramatic, just wrong, like the air was thicker, the shadows darker, like the house knew I'd brought someone else. And Calvin noticed it too, because he muttered, "It's cold in here, man. Way too cold." And as we checked each room, we noticed little things that made no sense. The cabinet doors were all open. My mom's favorite porcelain angel figurine was smashed on the floor, and the bathroom mirror, the one I'd punched, was completely intact again, not a single crack or shard. And when I pointed that out, Calvin turned pale and said, Nope, that's not normal." And we both agreed we needed to check the attic, because that's where it all seemed to center. And as we pulled down the ladder, the smell hit us first. Not quite rot, not quite mildew, but something ancient and foul, like something that had been buried and unburied, again and again. And we climbed up slowly, our lights cutting through the thick shadows. And the moment our heads cleared the opening, we both froze, because there, in the center of the attic, was a pile of old toys, children's shoes, and what looked like a worn teddy bear covered in ash, and surrounding it were symbols scratched into the wooden floor, crudely but deliberately. And Calvin whispered, "What the actual hell is this?" And I knelt beside the symbols, my hand trembling as I reached for the teddy bear. And the moment I touched it, the air shifted like the attic exhaled, and we both heard it, a soft, wet breathing from the corner, where the shadows were thickest. And slowly, a shape started to move, unfolding from the dark, like it had been watching us the whole time, and we saw something long and thin, with too many joints, crawling forward like a puppet, without strings. And its face, God, it looked like it had once been human, but had been stretched and melted into something obscene. Its eyes sunken in too wide, its jaw unhinged and twitching as it let out this clicking sound. And we ran, nearly falling off the attic ladder, slamming the panel shut and dragging a dresser under it, and we could still hear it pacing above us, crawling back and forth, tapping on the boards, whispering words we couldn't understand. and Calvin turned to me and said, "You've got to burn this house down?" And I wanted to agree, but it wasn't that simple. My parents owned it, and who would believe me anyway? So instead, we grabbed every religious item we could find, poured salt at every doorway and window, and I slept on the couch again. This time with Calvin on the floor nearby, both of us wide awake, praying, whispering, flinching at every creak. And around 3:17 a.m., the power went out, just dead silence and darkness. And that's when we heard the front door open, even though it was locked and sealed, and footsteps entered the house, slow and dragging, and we both held our breath as it walked past us in the dark, unseen but deeply felt, the kind of presence that pushes on your lungs and squeezes your brain like a vice. And it stood at the base of the stairs for what felt like hours, then climbed slowly up, creaking each step, before slamming the attic panel open from inside. And from that night on, the house changed. My parents returned, and I didn't tell them everything. Just said I thought someone had broken in, and they believed it, especially when they saw the footprints and broken door frame. But they refused to move, said it was just some but I knew better. And every night after that, something watched me from the attic, from the shadows, from the vents, and eventually I moved out, got my own apartment miles away. And for a while, the nightmares stopped until 3 weeks ago, when I woke up in my new place to find 3 knocks on my bedroom wall, slow and deliberate, and a faint whisper through the vent, "Come home." I haven't slept since. If this true Home Alone horror story sent chills down your spine, imagine what's waiting in the shadows of your own home tonight. Was it just a creak or a warning? Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment below. I want to hear your scariest experience being home alone. Until next time, keep the lights on.